And God said, Behold, I have given you every herb-bearing seed. To you it shall be for food. Genesis 1:29. Man did eat angels' food. He sent them meat to the full. Psalm 78:25. Everyday Manna with Lisa.
Hi everybody, and welcome to Everyday Manna. Today we are going to make a couple of fall soups. It's that time of the year when people start thinking pumpkin and spice and warm, cozy meals. That's what we're going to make today. We're going to make a cheesy potato soup with homemade croutons, and then we're going to make a pumpkin tomato bisque that is absolutely divine, served alongside with some little baguette type crostinis. So we're going to get started on the potato soup. Now I have a large soup pot here with just maybe a tablespoon of butter and some olive oil. You could use canola or vegetable. And I've got 4 slices of bacon here that I'm going to crisp up in that pot first. And I have mine on a separate little cutting board. You know, I don't like to put raw meat on my wooden board. You know, the studies go back and forth on that. They say it's safe, then they say it's not, but I just play it safe and use something that I know I can sanitize very well and, throw it in the dishwasher if need be. Now, I only use 4 slices of bacon here because I don't want the bacon to be the primary flavor. This is all about the potato and the cheese. But I do want that smoky added richness that the bacon will provide. So we're just going to let that simmer away and crisp up. Nothing major happening in there other than bacon cooking, which smells divine. Then we're going to chop up 1 medium-sized onion. Any kind of onion will work here. I just cut it in half, then I take off that outer peel. Sometimes I take off that outer layer. Sometimes that's a little dry. And then just chop it into a medium dice. You've seen me chop onions umpteen times before. I'm going to do a program soon on weekly meal planning and how to simplify your life in the afternoons or evenings when you get home from work by planning ahead. I'm working on some different things for that purpose. Now, once that crisps up, and it's not there yet, let's turn up the heat just a little bit. We'll add our onions. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually use 2 types of onion. I'm going to use some little green onions. Now, this is not absolutely necessary, but I'm going to garnish with the green part. So I thought, well, why not just use the little white part and some of the green in there? It's a different flavor than the regular yellow cooking onion, a little milder, and just adds some color and a different level of flavor to it. I love soup. And you've heard me say this before, and honestly, I do. I eat soups, stews, and chilies year-round. It can be 80 degrees outside, and I will be craving a pot of chili. And so I will make chili. It doesn't have to be cold weather for me to want soup. Now, I'm just going to go ahead and finely chop these. I'm not going to use the green part. This is strictly for garnish. But it will be good. I'm just going to put that aside. I'll just put it beside my butter because I'm going to use that butter anyway. Let's get that going. Now for this recipe, I am using Yukon Gold potatoes because I like the flavor. They hold their shape very, very well. I don't care for the red potatoes in this particular dish because I think the red potato is a little too waxy. I've scrubbed these. I don't peel my potatoes, but if you want to peel them, feel free. Go ahead and peel yours. The way I like to do it is just cut them in half to get a flat surface, and then cut them again, and then lay them flat on the board, and keep up the size. Whatever size you start with, that's how you need to maintain it. You need to keep them about the same size. Now, obviously, you're going to have a few little tiny chunks on the ends that may be a little different. And the reason that you want to do that, keep the majority of them the same size, is that they cook the same rate. I've got about 2 pounds of potatoes here. Oh, that's so good. I love it. Love it, love it, love it. And so, I'm not peeling mine. If you don't have Yukon Gold, you can use regular Idaho russet. You could use the little red potatoes. They just don't break down as much, and then you're not going to get that thickness that will come from the potato breaking down. I don't peel mine. Again, if you want to peel them, go right ahead. You could use little new potatoes too. It'd be delicious in this. Whew. Pop them. I love the smell of bacon. Turn that down just a little bit there. That's cooking ahead. Email me. They'll put the email address up on the screen. Let me know what your favorite soups are. What kind of soup maybe you would like to see me cook. If it's something I do, then I'd be happy to do it. And on that note, if there's certain recipes that you like that you've not seen me do and you want me to cook them, just let me know. Send me an email. She'll put it on the screen and let me know what you want to see me cook. Now, my bacon has rendered out some of the fat, so I'm going to add the onion to the pan. No need to drain that fat. That's what we want. I want to leave the drippings in there. And let that go for a few minutes. You don't want to brown the onions. You're just really softening them and cooking them until they turn translucent. Instantly, you smell that wonderful flavor of bacon and onion together. I'm going to add a couple of teaspoons of salt because I'm using kosher salt. If you're using regular table salt, probably 1 teaspoon would be enough. It's saltier. Spoon for spoon, it's saltier because the crystals are finer and you get more. I use kosher salt pretty much exclusively in all my cooking. The only time I use regular table salt, the kind that you put in the shaker that you pour out, is for brining, if I'm brining chicken or meat or something. I even brine beans when I'm cooking dried beans, or baking. A lot of times I'll use regular non-iodized salt for baking because it dissolves easier. The reason I don't use iodine in my salt is I have a thyroid issue, but you can feel free to use the iodized. Unless you're hyperthyroid like me and your thyroid goes crazy, then I suggest the non-iodized kind. All right, I'm going to take a quick break, just clean up here, finish chopping these potatoes. When I come back, we'll get the potatoes in there. I'm just going to let the onion soften, and we'll get started on the next soup. I'll be back in just a second. Alrighty, now our potatoes are chopped, our onion is just slightly translucent, which is what we want, and I want you to see down in the bottom of the pot. You see this? That right there? That's called the fond, F-O-N-D. That's flavor, that's caramelization, the natural sugars that have come out of the onion. You do not want to waste that. That's why I'm starting it in this pot. When you add liquid to it, and in this case, I'm using chicken broth. a lot of it. Take your flat spatula and go along the bottom of the pan just like this, and that just loosens all that up because you don't want to waste that. That's flavor. There we go. Now, let's add our potatoes. Let's turn this up just a little bit. Add all these potatoes. We're just going to let this simmer. Now, this is a thick soup. This is not a watery, thin brothed soup. So it's going to seem like you got way too many potatoes, but you don't. Trust me. They're going to release a little bit of liquid too. I use about 32 ounces of chicken broth, somewhere in there. And you could use water if you wanted to. If you don't have any chicken broth, you could use water. Now, we're just going to let that come up to a simmer and cook. That's all you need to do at this point. Put your lid on, let it come up to a simmer, let it go for about 30 minutes or so until those potatoes are tender. Next, we're going to get started on a pumpkin tomato bisque. So good. Sounds fancy, couldn't be any easier. I have a food processor here. You could also use a blender. And I have 1 can, well, let's get started first on the other part. Let's get started on the onion first. Let's let that have time. I have another soup pot here that I'm going to put over medium heat. Going to add a little bit of butter and a little bit, about a tablespoon of butter and about a tablespoon of olive oil. I want the flavor of the butter, but butter does not have a high cooking temperature. And the olive oil, or any kind of oil, will help raise that to where the butter doesn't burn, but yet you get the flavor from the butter. I have another onion. You know, most soups honestly do start with onions. So we're going to chop up an onion here and get that going. Get it sauteing while we talk about the tomatoes. If you have fresh garden tomatoes, absolutely use those fresh garden tomatoes. Or home canned tomatoes. If you can your own tomatoes, use those. If you don't, do what I did. And that's buy a big can, the big can of whole tomatoes. I like to get the whole tomatoes for this because I know they're not, they don't have the extra ingredients in it used to keep the chemicals, basically, that they add. They're safe to add, like the diced tomatoes or the crushed up tomatoes, to keep them from deteriorating any further. They don't have any of that, and you can control the thickness of your tomato. Now, I have 1 big can of whole peeled tomatoes, and I'm just going to add the tomatoes first to my food processor, the working bowl fitted with the steel blade. If you don't have one of these, you can use a blender. It's fine. And then we're going to pulse it just for a couple of seconds, just to break down those tomatoes a little bit. Then I'm going to add the juice and finish pureeing it. Now, you want this smooth because we're making a bisque, and a bisque is very smooth. If you wanted to, instead of chopping the onions, since you're going to use your food processor anyway, you could chop the onions in the food processor, would be fine. Turn that on high and kind of let it go for just, 30 to 40 seconds until it's very, very smooth. And that's perfect. Just let that sit right where it is for a few minutes until our onions soften up. Got to remember which spoon goes with which. Get that turned up just a little. And again, I'm not browning these onions. I'm just cooking them until they're translucent. Add a little bit of salt. Again, a couple of teaspoons. And a little bit of freshly ground pepper. This is freshly ground. I just blitz up some peppercorns in a little small coffee mill. I've told you how to do that. On days when I have a lot of cooking to do, I keep one of those little bowls handy. Now, I want to talk to you for just a second about pumpkin. When you go to buy the pumpkin for this soup, do not get what's called pumpkin pie filling. There'll be two kinds of pumpkin. And for whatever reason, I guess because people tend to cook with it and bake with it, this will be found in the baking aisle most of the time. But you want to get, and I'll show you what you want to get. You want to get what's called 100% pure pumpkin. Don't get the can. It'll look very similar to this. But read your label. Make sure it doesn't say pumpkin pie filling. This has nothing in it, according to the ingredients, but pumpkin, which is what you want. We want 2 cans of that. They're 15 ounces. You could get a pie pumpkin, not jack-o'-lantern carving pumpkins, but the little small sugar pumpkins. Cook that off and puree it if you wanted to, but honestly, this tastes just as good and is a whole lot less work. So I don't use that. I use these. All right, that's good. Now, my onion is just translucent. I'm going to add my tomatoes to that. And it's going to pop out like crazy. Come on. Get all of that goodness out of there. If you've got home canned tomatoes, do the same thing. Process them to make them, you know, smoother. Some people strain theirs. I don't mind a little bit of flavor. A little bit of texture, rather. I don't mind that. If you want to strain them, go right ahead. I'm going to add some chicken broth to it. I'm going to play that one back here. I've got 32 ounces there, but we may or may not need all that. We will see. And then I'm going to add my pumpkin, 2 cans. And if you like the flavor of pumpkin, you are going to love this soup. And I do. I love pumpkin anything. My favorite pie is pumpkin pie. I love pumpkin spice muffins and scones and the roll, you know, the pumpkin roll that people make about Thanksgiving time with that filling, that cream cheese filling. We need to make that one day. I make those at home. They're really good and really easy to cook and make and delicious. I like anything with pumpkin. Pumpkin spice coffee creamer in my coffee. Ugh. That's when you know it's pumpkin or fall, when you start seeing pumpkin spice coffee. You know it's time. Now, I'm just going to let this come up to a simmer. When that gets hot, that pumpkin will start melting in. Then we're going to take a whisk, and we're going to start just whisking that smooth. We're going to take a quick break. I'm just going to let these 2 soups come up to a simmer. When I come back, I'm going to show you how to make homemade croutons and baguette slices, crostinis, to top both of these soups. I'll be back in just a minute. Alrighty, now our soups are simmering away. There's a couple things we need to do real quick. To our potato soup, we're going to add about half a teaspoon of paprika, sweet paprika. That just adds a little bit of a depth of flavor. Just stir that in. And to our tomato pumpkin bisque, which I've got on low, I'm going to add about a tablespoon of honey. Now, the reason you add the honey in there is to cut the acidity of the tomatoes. And then just whisk that in there. That smells so good. I wish you could smell that. I'm going to let them simmer away. The potatoes are almost ready. So we are going to make some toppings for these soups. Now, I have a couple of, which I've already got some sliced up, just the French baguettes that you buy in the grocery store. And I'm going to make the little crostinis for the one soup. And all you need to do is just slice it as thin or as thick as you want. The key is get them all the same size. I'll just eat that one in a minute. And get those on a lined baking sheet in one layer. Couldn't be simpler. It really could not be simpler. And then I'm going to drizzle it with, this is where you really will want to use olive oil because you want the flavor, the fruity flavor of the oil. If you don't want to use oil, you could use melted butter. And then I like to sprinkle it with just a little bit of pepper, just to add a little bit of heat to the soup. And we're going to put these in a 425-degree oven just a couple of minutes. So let's get this one in the oven while we make the croutons. Couldn't be simpler. But it adds flavor. But it also is a texture thing because our soups are smooth and, you know, very silky. That adds crunch to it because we're going to toast it. Other half of the baguette, and we're going to make croutons. And all you do for that, you'll need a serrated knife. Cut them about an inch thick, the bread, that is. And then take a couple of slices of it. Cut it down the middle. I like big croutons. Depending on how big your baguette is, you know, whether you'll need to do 1 or 2 slices through there. This is a skinny one, and most of them are skinny, the baguettes are. If you don't have a baguette, you can use any kind of crusty bread. Doesn't matter. This particular package just had 2 of them in there. I just put those to the side, and I'm going to have a snack. Cut them into quarters. Serrated knife is best for this, my friends. This works like a dream. If you don't want to make your own homemade croutons, you can buy them. But they're not difficult. Well, let's just go ahead and add our little ends in. I was going to slather it with butter and eat it. I love bread. Now, same thing. Just a little bit of olive oil. This is extra virgin olive oil that I'm about out of. I need to refill my container. I'm not out. I've got plenty. I like the Pompeian. It's inexpensive, and you can buy it at the grocery store. Not expensive at all. Toss that together. Single layer. Same thing. Salt and pepper. If you happen to have like the flaky sea salt, the Malden salt, that works beautifully with this. This one I'm going to add just a little bit of salt, kosher salt. You could add any kind of flavors, any herbs that you want. I'm just going to do salt and pepper because I really don't want to take away from the flavors of the soup. In the oven they go. 5 minutes, they'll be done. That's toasting up. Let's let that go for just a second more. And we'll finish up our soups. Now, our potatoes are done, and how you know, take a knife or a fork, and if it inserts in there easy, they're tender. I'm going to take an immersion blender. If you don't have one of these, okay, you can use one of these. This is just the old-fashioned potato masher, and you can go down in there. I'll just use this since I'm already in there. You don't want to crush them up silky smooth, but you do want to break them up a little bit, just a little bit, to kind of add some thickness to the soup. And then some cheddar cheese. Turn that down a little bit. About a cup or so of cheddar cheese. And then just stir that in until the cheese melts. And that's it. That's cheesy potato soup. You want to taste for seasoning on both soups. Let's see if we need to add any salt or pepper. Probably do. Yep, just a little bit more. Maybe a teaspoon more of salt. And then that's done. Just turn that down to low and let it heat and thicken up. And our wonderful bisque. But now remember, this does have chunks of onions, so I'm going to use an immersion blender in this one. If you don't have one of these, you can use a regular blender. Be careful when you're using a regular blender with hot product because it can explode out of the top. Be very careful. These are only about $20, and they're really worth it. This will just puree those onion chunks. Now, if you wanted, don't use this on a non-stick pot though, by the way. If you wanted to run that through a sieve to make it silky creamy, you could. I'm not. I just, you know, it's fine with me the way it is. Oh, let me taste that one for seasoning. I didn't do that, did I? Clean spoon. See if we need to add any salt. Always taste your soups. Hot but good. And then I'm going to serve this in a bowl. Pumpkin, in case you don't know, is extremely healthy. And then we're going to garnish that with a few of our green onions and then our little croutons, which we need to get out of the oven. And then our wonderful potato soup. Let's get another spoon and some of our wonderful, delicious potato soup on a cold evening. Oh, nothing better. Served with either the croutons or some cornbread. Delicious. Absolutely delicious. Serve it with a sprinkling of the chives or the green onion tops. Now, let's check our bread. Probably ready. And it may need to be turned. Let's see here what we got. Ah, can you see? Yep. They're crispy, golden. Let's turn them over real quick and then just go at it for about another minute. Okay, now here's our soups, our wonderful little crustinis. They're just nice and crusty, and I would just serve those alongside either soup is fine. And here are your little homemade croutons. See how crispy and crunchy they are? I would just put a couple of those right on that soup and serve those right in there, and oh my goodness, yummy, yummy, yummy. There's a couple of quick, easy fall soups for you to try. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you next time on Everyday Manna.
Thank you for watching Everyday Manna with Lisa. This program is made possible by viewers like you. Your support is continually needed to keep Christian programming on the air. Please send your best financial gift to Living Faith Television in care of Everyday Manna, P.O. Box 1867, Abingdon, Virginia 24212.